Hey guys, Stealth here. In this deck review I'm looking at a deck which was sent to me by Sullian. It's a Blue Dragon's deck, so we're looking at South Korea and Japan. Now with this, his mission profile is to be effective at urban fighting and to get air superiority. So what he has is a lot of AA units, a lot of air superiority fighters and pretty good high-end infantry. He asks me to have a look at what he could do to improve the deck even more at urban warfare. And to improve it by showing the most serious flaws. First off, he has a general deck, and if you want to be very effective at urban warfare, I think that having a mechanized deck would be better. Now, I'm not going to recreate an entire Blue Dragon's mechanized deck. I think I already did a video on that once. So if you want to have a look at that, be sure to click on that link in the description. That is, if I have a video. I'm not sure about that yet. What we could do with this Blue Dragon's deck, let's have a look. In the logistics, you got the FOB, you got the CH-47D Chinook transports, and you got the Chugatas. No concern here. The Hayate, or Hayati, I'm not sure how you should pronounce that in Japanese, command vehicle is an okay command vehicle, but if you want to do a lot of urban warfare, command infantry might be better. It really depends on the kind of games you're playing, and he mentioned that he wants to do it in 2v2 and more. Now, I'm not sure if that and more is going to encompass going all the way up to 10v10s, because there you usually don't need that many command vehicles. If we were to switch these to command infantry, you will lose 3 command vehicles, which I still think is worth it. So let's delete the Hayati and let's bring these guys in a Humvee. That did just scrape off 3 command units, but I guess he's just going to have to rely on his teammates as well. I know it's a very dangerous thing to rely on your teammates in a 10v10, but you never know. Infantry. First off, 1 card of Mistrals, good choice. His transport's a KM900. You could go with the K200, it doesn't really matter that much. This thing is a bit faster because it's wheeled. This one has slightly more frontal armor, but this doesn't really impact it that much. He has 7 of these at trained, so this is part of his air superiority force. Good choice. The Mistrals are excellent AA units, and they already got a good base accuracy, so with no need with just these. Then he has Haebyung 90s and LVTP 7s. Now, unfortunately, the LVTP 7s don't get a grenade launcher, not like the US Marines. They just get a standard M2 Browning machine gun. He has 10 of these at veteran, and you can take 14 of them at hardened, but I think that 20 infantry units, especially combined with a couple of Kutai 90s, should be enough. It depends a little bit on the kind of engagement, but if you're going to have to burn through 27 infantry units, you're probably doing something wrong. There's not really anything I see in infantry here with the Haebyungs and the Kutais that I would change. The Haebyungs are great units. What I would like to have in here is one of those super IFVs that the South Koreans get. For example, the 4050 with a grenade launcher or the KAV-25 with an autocannon. I think that would make an interesting adjustment or addition to this deck. The difference is that this one has a lot more AP power, it has 2 AP power, and this one's better versus anti-infantry. But then again, you already got the Haebyung themselves for that, and this thing is a little bit more versatile than the 4050. So what I'm going to do is delete one of those cards and take 1 card of the 25s. We're going to take those at hardened to make sure that we still have a good number, but that they're a little bit more resilient to enemy fire. And with that, of course, you also get 14 of those KAV-25s with the autocannon. Then he has 10 Chumats being brought in a Nana Sanshiki. Just your standard transport, you don't really have a lot of choice here. You got the Humvee, which interestingly is more expensive than an armored vehicle. So definitely go with the Nana Sanshiki unless you want these guys to arrive very, very quickly in their Humvees. He has 10 of these, which I think is a pretty high amount, but he does have a high base accuracy in the Chumats. So for infantry warfare, yeah, I think this should work. In support, let's see, he has a decent amount of AA. We got the gun tank, good AA gun. I'm always, when I'm building a South Korean / Japan deck, torn between the gun tank and the Biho. The difference between these things is pretty hard to find. It's mostly in the platform, 3 frontal armor, 3 side, versus 2 and 2. It's a little less mobile. It has the same very good air detection. The autonomy for the Biho is a little bit higher, and that could make the gun tank slightly less appealing, because you may need to rearm and refuel these guys sooner. Otherwise, the weapon system on the gun tank is a little better because it has a better stabilizer. It has a lower rate of fire though, but a higher amount of suppression. So the amount of damage that it's going to do to the enemy's morale and stun damage is higher. Otherwise, they're both radar guided, so it doesn't really matter that much. It's such a minor difference that it doesn't really matter which kind of tank you take, or which kind of AA gun. I think that the gun tank is a slightly better choice, because it has more accuracy. It fires a slightly bigger caliber round, 35mm versus 30. Slightly higher suppression, lower rate of fire, but that's okay because the rounds do a little bit more damage. So let's just stick with the gun tank. He has 7 of those at trained. You could take 5 at hardened, but I think 7's enough because they got a good base accuracy. If you were to do a 10v10 game, or sorry, a tactical gameplay, so low point income, then having them at hardened would be a little better. But since it's probably just a general deck, I'm just going to keep them at trained. Then he has the M727 iHawk Pip 3, sorry, Pip 2, not the Pip 3. Americans get the Pip 3. You don't get that many options for long-range anti-air missile defense. You got the Karyu Hawk, you got the Hawk 3, sorry, the Hawk 2. You have the short arrow, but that's not really versus airplanes, mostly against helicopters. The iHawk versus the Pip 2 has slightly more range on helicopters on the Pip 2, which could be why I would not take this unit. Because I don't want them to fire these missiles at helicopters. We got the gun tanks for that. I want them to go purely for airplanes. And since they really only have 3 missiles, you're going to have to babysit these guys already. So having these things also fire at helicopters would, I think it would be a bit detrimental to the air defense. Then there's the Karyu Hawk, which I believe is just exactly the same as the M727, let's see, same range, same accuracy, yeah, it's the same vehicle. Except that this one's a bit slower off-road, 25-35. So what I'm going to do is take out the Pip 2 and bring in 1 card of iHawks. And this also slightly upvets the iHawk, so it has a little bit more chance to hit the airplanes. And with that, combined with the short arrow, we got anti-helicopter defense on the gun tank, the short arrow, and longer range anti-plane defense on the iHawk. You just don't get that many of them, so be very careful and turn the radar off if you're not using it. The short arrow is definitely a good choice. The alternative would be the closed arrow, and they have different roles really. The short arrow I like because it has higher range. I dislike it because it has less accuracy, and that's exactly the change that you see here. But this thing at least can fire outside the range of enemy helicopter ATGMs, whereas the closed arrow cannot do that. Most ATGMs on helicopters have a range of 2600 or greater, with a cap of pretty much 2975, I believe. So having an anti-helicopter defense with 2450 is not that great, and that's where I'm going to stick with the short arrow. Then he has 7 KM-106 mortar carriers. Good choice, always nice to have some support for your infantry. They carry 72 rounds with a very decent HE power and good dispersion, so definitely not going to change anything there. And then 2 K9 Thunders. I still have not used these things because I rarely play Blue Dragons. I really should have a look at that, but from what I've been hearing, the K9 Thunder is an excellent machine. So we're going to keep this in here as well. In tanks, he has 2 Kyu Marushikis, which are very good Japanese tanks. Pretty much Leopard 2A5s, Leopard 2A4s on steroids. On steroids because they got a very high rate of fire of 12. The only thing that's not that great about this tank is autonomy of 350, but you gotta have one sort of super tank in your game, in your setup, so you might as well get the Kyu. Also, I believe it's the only high point tank in the game that is not a prototype. So if you wanted to, you could get 2 cards of these and get 4 of these tanks in your game. Then he has some K1s, which I think is a good choice. These are very, very solid tanks. They have rarely, if ever, failed me, because they got a good mix between frontal armor, damage that they do, accuracy, mobility. There's just nothing that I find wrong with this tank. Then some Nanayon Gs with the grenade launcher. Good unit to support infantry versus other infantry. With the grenade launcher, you're going to chew through the enemy infantry very, very quickly. So that is something that you really want to have in a Blue Dragon's deck. Because this thing, combined with a good main gun, makes it a very effective tank. And then the M48A5. I don't really like the patents because they don't have that much frontal armor. But they do have one hell of a gun on there with 17 AP power. That's a very high-end gun for a 45-point vehicle. The problem is that they have poor optics, so you gotta have some recon unit nearby to spot for them. The thing about them is that you don't really get a good alternative. There's not really any good other units in here that you want to use as a low point tank. The one thing that you can have a look at is the Nanayon E, which is a slightly different tank. It has more accuracy, a little bit less AP power on the gun, but slightly more armor. It is a little bit more mobile, 55 versus 50. It's a medium-sized tank versus big, so it's more difficult to lock onto this thing using ATGMs. And otherwise the stats are pretty much the same. It does have a higher rate of fire though. And with the high rate of fire, the better accuracy, I think that for 5 points more, this is a slightly more effective tank. We get 14 of the patents, and we're going to get 14 of the Nanayon E, so I think this is a slight upgrade. Reconnaissance. That's quite a bit of infantry he has in here. Teokyon Sas, I believe they're called. Being brought in a Blackhawk. Good recon infantry. These are pretty much commando status because they got the elite training. You can use these guys behind the enemy lines to operate very, very nastily, because this Carl Gustaf can engage and destroy pretty much any vehicle. Only heavy tanks need maybe 2 or 3 rounds, depending on the type of tank you're engaging and where you're hitting it. But these guys I would not use as passive spotters, but as active guys operating behind enemy lines, possibly in combination with some of your infantry, like the Kutai 90s. This I find interesting. He has 10 of these, which I think is too many and the wrong vehicle. Now I'm saying wrong vehicle because in my mind recon infantry is always deployed very, very quickly. And you don't want to have a KM900 which has poor stealth to give its position away. Whereas a Bell 205 can just fly in, drop them off and get the hell out so that the enemy doesn't know where you are. Of course, an alternative is the UH-1 or the UH-60, the Black Hawk. And the Black Hawk, I think, is a very, very big upgrade over the Suzek Day. But Sullian might have been thinking that he wants to use the Suzek Day in infantry warfare as well. The problem is that they don't have the capacity to do that. They don't have a machine gun, they got a pretty bad M16, and they're only a 5-man squad, so these gotta be passive spotters. So with that I'm going to delete them, and I'm going to take 7 of them at Hardened, which gives them a little bit more spotting ability, and at 7 you should still have enough of these. Then he has 4 OH-1 Ninjas, very, very stealthy helicopters, good stealth on these, exceptional optics, good speed, very small. Very, very nice helicopter and a no-brainer if you're using a deck like this. And then he has the Fiat 6616. Very, very nice recon, and I'm always a bit torn between getting that one or the KAFV 90. It depends on the mission profile, really. Because if you look at the KAV-90, you're going to see that it has the Cockerill Mark 8, which is a nice 13 AP power gun, which means that this thing can fire at tanks from an ambush position with their medium stealth and destroy them. This one is mostly geared toward anti-infantry warfare, with a grenade launcher and an autocannon, which are both not that very accurate, but it's an extremely mobile vehicle, 100 kph off-road, very good optics versus good. And I'm not sure what would be better, but I think the KAV-90, because he does have the Suzak Days and the Chukyon SAS to make sure that he can do passive and active spotting. So what you could use the KAV-90s for is spotting the enemy. And another advantage that the KAV-90 has over the 6616 is higher availability. You see that the 6616 has 7 trained or 5 at hardened, whereas the KAV has 10 at hardened, which I think makes them a little bit better at recon, because you can spread them out more than the Fiat 66. In vehicles, he has the KM132 Napalm, good choice, especially if you're going to do urban warfare. This is a mandatory unit, you want to have Napalm. Then he has some ITO launchers. He picked 10 of these, which should be enough to suppress pretty much any tank. Let's see if there are any upgrades available to see if we can get a bit higher anti-tank capability, because these things do have 20 AP power, which is great, but a TOW 2 has slightly more AP power. They do get more expensive though, that is missile wise. They spend a little bit more supplies on keeping these things firing, and they only carry 4. Another unit is the ITO, or the Chumat. Well, the Chumat's not that great either. So I think that this one is a good choice. I would not adjust anything here. Helicopters, only one unit in the form of the AH-1T. Now, most of these helicopters are pretty similar. You got the AH-1T, you get the AH-1S, which the only difference is that the AH-1S gets ITOs and this one gets TOW 2s. So this is his heavy anti-armor capability. You gotta be careful though, you don't get that many of them, only 5 with the veterancy. But they do carry very, very accurate high AP power missiles. So if you're engaging an armored push, bring a couple of these and they'll clean it right up for you. Other helicopters that would be nice to have, the AH-1S is, I think, the same pretty much. Sorry, he has the AH-1T in here, and there's the S. Yeah, that's the ITO difference, and that's the same as this one. So they share this unit, they just have a different designation for it. And then AirTab, he has 2 air superiority fighters of the F-15J type, 1 KAFC Block 52D with its HARM missiles, so this doubles as a seaplane and air superiority fighter. A couple of Peace Pheasants and some more Peace Pheasants with ATGMs. Now let's have a look at the air superiorities. He chose for, because it's a multi-role, let's add those as well then. I couldn't find the, hang on, it's not a multi-role, it's probably classed as a seed. Yeah, there it is. I was looking for this one, the Block 52D. This one's classed as a seed plane. I think that you should be classing it as a multi-role because it can do both seed and air superiority fighting. Very good ECM for both anti-radar missions and anti-plane missions. Very nice MRAM on that, and unfortunately you only get one of them at hardened because they are that great. You could, if you wanted to, get another one of these, but they're very expensive. If you compare that to the F-15J, you're going to see some differences. The ECM on the 15J is slightly worse, and the Sparrows that they carry are semi-active. That means they have to stay on target until the missile impacts. The MRAM does not have that problem with fire and forget, but the damage that the Sparrows do is slightly higher. An alternative would be the KF-16C. Let's compare those with the 15J. You're going to see that this thing has a better turn radius, which means that it's more likely to get a hit because it can turn faster and get behind the enemy. The one thing that it does lack is short-range air-to-air missiles, like the AIM-9s. Any version will do, by the way. It's just a slightly accurate buff here and there. The ECM is the same, air detection is the same, and the speed is the same. The difference is that the 15J seems more geared towards dogfighting with these M9s, whereas the MRAMs seem more of a standoff anti-plane warfare. So with these you do a long-range anti-plane strike. With these things you try to get a Sparrow on target. If you can get the Sparrow on target and do a lot of damage, you pretty much got half the plane dead. And then you can finish him off with an AIM-9. So with his role of air superiority in mind, I think that the 15J is going to do that job slightly better than the 16C. Let's switch this back to select all, so we can have a look at the Peace Pheasant. Nice unit this, especially if you want to carpet bomb large areas of the map. It depends a little bit on what you're engaging, because they're not good against other vehicles. They will damage them, but usually not destroy them. An alternative for this one would be the F1, which is, I'm not going to say the complete opposite, but it does have a different mission profile, because this laser-guided HE bomb is going to be very, very effective at engaging both tanks and vehicles and infantry. So it has a little bit more application than the Peace Pheasant. They are both not very well at the ECM section, only 10% for each. And I think that the GSC-1 M117 bomb is slightly better than the Mark 82. So we're going to take out the Peace Pheasant, and we're going to add the F1. And since it's just a bomb delivery truck, as I used to call them, we're going to take 4 of those at rookie. Then he has 2 Peace Pheasant 2s, which are armed with the anti-tank missiles, the Mavericks. You don't really get that many of them. You get the Peace Pheasant or the Saber. Well, there's pretty much no comparison between these two, because this one gets an actual anti-tank missile, and this one just gets a couple of rocket pods, which do 4 HE damage. They're never going to do a lot of damage to tanks. So stick with the Peace Pheasant, and he has 2 of those at rookie. If you're doing a low point tactical game, go for 1 at veteran. But for now I think this is a good setup. Naval tab. 4 ships, including 1 LCU, 2 Lafayettes, a couple of Chamseries for defense, a couple of Pohangs. The Super Hornets I would take away. I know that they are nice multi-role fighters because they got both the Harpoons and the MRAMs, so they can also fly air detection or air protection for your fleet. But lately I've been going either all air, so all anti-ship planes, and possibly an air superiority fighter, all or ships. And with that, the ships can support each other slightly better. So my preference is not having a Super Hornet in a setup like this. Instead we're going to go with, let's see what kind of ship would be good here. He does have a pretty decent anti-ship defense and a nice gun on these. If you want to support your infantry, you could take a ship that I rarely use, but which does do that job very well, in the form of the Type 21 frigate. And that's because this Vickers Mark 8 gun is very nice. It's only a 135 point ship, and if you compare that to the Lafayette, you can see that the Lafayette has slightly more range. But the damage that the Type 21 does is better, because it fires a slightly higher caliber shell than the 68 TR main gun on the Lafayette. Another ship that could be useful here, it depends on how close you want to operate to the enemy shore, would be STRB 90s. Just look at the size difference between that and the Type 21, by the way. These guys with their Hellfires and the Mark 19 grenade launchers. Dong Haze could be interesting, but I don't think they're that useful. Not for his role anyway. Unless you want to have a good anti-air unit with both ranges against airplanes and helicopters at 3500. And they get a decent gun, but is not that good a range against ground targets. Of course, you can bring in the Congo, which has an extremely high range gun, very, very survivable ship, but it's also going to be the main target for the enemy to take down. Oliver Hazard Perrys could be useful. The problem is that their range again is not that great. So I think that the Type 21, seeing as he already has enough anti-ship capability slash supplies, the Type 21 could be useful here. And if you were in a pinch, you could still use the exocets to go after enemy ships if you wanted to, but I would go for those mostly with Pohangs and the Lafayettes themselves. Just make sure that these things don't die, because if one of them or two of them die, then the rest of your fleet is pretty much doomed. So with this, since they're only here for ground pounding, I would take 3 of them at rookie. So not a lot of adjustments in this Blue Dragon's general deck. I think that Sullian did already a good job. As I mentioned at the beginning, he could maybe do a better job at being great at urban warfare if he were to pick a mechanized deck or motorized, but mechanized is slightly better in my taste because you get better IFVs. Otherwise, I think that with this general deck, this is pretty much, well, the best setup that you can have if you're going to do a lot of urban warfare. So Sullian, I hope you're happy with this deck. If you are, the deck code's in the description below. And if you're watching this video and you think, hey, have a look at my deck, that can be done. Just send it to me through the link that's in the description as well. With that, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you did, please hit that like button. And if you still have a question about a deck, if you want to have me look at your deck, the link is in the video down below. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next video.